In the quiet town of Mbasi, nestled between rolling hills and peaceful farmlands, had always been a place of trade and hard work. People sold all kinds of goods in the bustling market, from colorful fabrics to delicious food. Mbasi was always busy. People bought and sold things every day. Everyone had a business or a craft. The community is a small town, with simple but well-maintained houses lining the streets. The people are a mix of hard-working individuals, farmers, traders, and craftsmen who have lived in the area for generations. The market is busy and bustling with activity, but the streets are peaceful, reflecting the traditional values and quiet life of the town. But ever since Munachi arrived, something strange had taken over the town. Munachi was not just beautiful, she was enchanting. Her eyes sparkled like the stars, and her smile could make anyone stop in their tracks. Every man wanted to be near her, and every woman wanted to be like her. She ran the biggest shop in Mbasi's center market, selling beads and fancy accessories. But it wasn't just her products that drew people in, it was something about her presence. Women admired the way she walked, the way she spoke, the effortless way she made people listen. But the most mysterious thing about Munachi was the waist beads she wore. They were not like any other beads, they were rare, glowing faintly under the sunlight. When she walked, the beads made a soft, musical sound, and whenever that sound filled the air, men lost their focus, their thoughts drifting only to her. Some women tried to copy her. They bought waist beads, hoping to capture the same attention. But no matter what they did, no one could match Munachi's charm. This made some of them jealous, whispering among themselves. "How does she do it?" they asked. "Why are our men acting like they are under a spell?" Despite the growing suspicions, Munachi remained unbothered. She knew exactly what she wanted. She ignored poor and middle-class men, setting her sights only on the richest, most powerful, and most influential men in town. And one by one, they all fell for her. Some began to suspect that there was more to Munachi than met the eye, but she did not seem to care. Rumors about her beauty and her irresistible charm spread through the town. But one thing was certain, Munachi never entertained poor or middle-class men. She only set her sights on the richest, most powerful, and most influential men in Mbasi. But something strange was happening. The men who spent time with Munachi began to change. Some of them lost their energy, becoming weak and tired, as if something had drained them. Others became obsessed, willing to give up everything just to be near her. Obina had always been the most powerful businessman in Mbasi. Everyone knew him. He owned the biggest electronics store, not just in Mbasi but in neighboring towns too. Rich, influential, and respected, Obina was used to getting whatever he wanted. One afternoon, while visiting the market, he heard a soft, musical sound. It was strange yet beautiful, like tiny bells ringing in the air. He turned his head and saw her, Munachi. She moved gracefully, her waist beads making that same sound with every step. Obina's heart skipped a beat. He had never seen a woman like her before. Her beauty was hypnotic, her smile inviting yet mysterious. He nudged his friend and whispered, "Who is that?" His friend chuckled. "That's Munachi. The woman who has enchanted every man in this town. But don't waste your time, Obina. She doesn't give anyone a chance." Obina smirked. "I must have her. No woman has ever told me no." That evening, Obina sent his driver with expensive gifts, gold jewelry, designer perfumes, and bundles of cash. But Munachi simply smiled and refused them. This only made Obina want her more. "I like a challenge," he muttered to himself. The next day, Obina decided to visit her shop in person. Dressed in his finest suit, he walked in confidently and spoke with his deep, commanding voice. "Munachi, I want you. Name your price." I will spoil you with my riches. Munachi tilted her head and smiled. If you desire me so much, then show me. Obina didn't hesitate. He invited her to an expensive dinner. They dined at the finest restaurant in town, eating the best food and drinking the most expensive wine. By the end of the night, he was completely under her spell. He took her to a luxurious hotel nearby, eager to make her his. As Obina reached for her, his hand brushed against her waist beads. He gasped. They were ice cold, like they had been kept in a freezer. A strange feeling washed over him. Take them off, he said uneasily. Munachi's eyes darkened slightly. They are a part of me, she said. A gift from my grandmother. Obina shook off his discomfort. The night continued, filled with pleasure and passion. But by morning, something was wrong. Obina woke up feeling empty, like a part of him was missing. He dismissed the feeling, thinking it was just exhaustion from the night before. As he left the hotel, his phone rang. It was his personal assistant. The voice on the other end was frantic. Sir. The warehouse, it's on fire. Obina's blood turned cold. He rushed to his warehouse, only to see it engulfed in flames. The fire raged wildly, consuming everything. His workers ran around helplessly, unable to stop it. Before he could even process the disaster, his phone rang again. This time, it was his shipment company. Mr. Obina. I'm so sorry. Your cargo ship sank. Everything is gone. Obina staggered back, his mind spinning. Then, another call. This time, from his wife. The bank has seized our mansion, she said, her voice shaking. They took our cars and all our properties. Obina, what is happening? Within 7 days, Obina lost everything, his business, his wealth, his family. His wife took their children and left him, saying, this is not the life I signed up for. Now, the once powerful Obina sat on the streets, homeless and broken. He had no idea what had happened, no clue why his life had collapsed so suddenly. But Munachi knew. She always knew. And somewhere, in the shadows of Mbasi, she smiled. Richard was a successful marine engineer, living a life many people envied. His tailored suits, shiny cars, and the air of confidence he carried with him wherever he went made him stand out in any crowd. He had everything, wealth, looks, and a reputation that made him a man others admired. It was a warm evening when Richard stepped out of the restaurant after a meeting with a few business partners. He took a deep breath, enjoying the cool evening breeze, when his eyes caught sight of her. Munachi. She was standing by the entrance of the cafe, her beauty undeniable, and her eyes seemed to shine with mystery. Without thinking, Richard walked straight toward her. His charm was like a magnet, and before long, he was beside her, flashing his famous smile. I want to change your life, he said confidently, as if it was the most natural thing to say to a stranger. Munachi raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. Oh really, she replied with a slight smirk. Well, if you want me, you'll have to prove it. Richard's curiosity piqued. What do you mean? Prove that you can offer more than just your wealth, she said, her voice low and calm. Come to dinner tonight. Show me that you're different. Richard agreed without hesitation, his mind already racing with excitement at the challenge. What could possibly stop him from winning her over? That evening, as they sat across from each other at a candlelit table, the conversation flowed effortlessly. Richard felt a connection with Munachi, unlike anything he had ever experienced. She wasn't impressed by his wealth. She wanted something deeper. And he wanted to show her he was capable of more than just being a rich man. When the evening ended, they found themselves alone in Richard's luxurious apartment. The lights were dim, the air thick with tension. As they moved closer, Richard noticed something odd, a coldness against his skin as he brushed past her waist. A string of beads rested on her waist, its surface colder than ice. "Why is it so cold?" Richard asked, his curiosity piqued. Munachi glanced at the beads but didn't seem fazed. "It's a gift from my grandmother," she said softly. "It's like a second skin to me. I can't take it off." Richard frowned but didn't press the issue. He was desperate. Desperate to prove that he could win her over. They continued, pushing aside the strange feeling in the air. The next morning, Richard woke up alone. The bed was cold, and an empty feeling gnawed at him. He brushed it off, remembering the night before and the pleasure it had brought. But something still felt off. It was like a piece of him was missing, but he couldn't figure out what. As he arrived at the office, Richard noticed something strange. His boss was avoiding his gaze. A thick envelope sat on his desk. He tore it open, his heart sinking as he read the contents. A sack letter. He was being fired, but the reason was unclear. His boss couldn't give him any answers. "Why?" Richard asked, almost desperate. "Sorry, Richard," his boss said with an apologetic tone. "It's from the head office. I can't do anything." Devastated, Richard left the office, his mind racing. His entire world was falling apart. But things were about to get worse. That evening, on his way home, Richard's car skidded out of control. The screech of tires, the shattering of glass, the feeling of weightlessness, it all happened in an instant. And then, darkness. He woke up in a hospital bed a week later. His body was bruised, and every movement felt painful. But the worst news was yet to come. The doctor's face was grim as he spoke. "Richard," the doctor said slowly, "your injuries are severe. The surgery was complicated, and I'm afraid you may never be able to work again." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. A life of luxury, of success, suddenly seemed so far away. But it wasn't just his body that had been broken. His mind, his spirit, it all felt shattered. Days later, Richard found himself standing in the street, homeless. His cars, his property, everything had been sold off to pay for his medical bills. It was as if the world had turned its back on him. But there was one person who knew exactly what had happened, Munachi. She had disappeared, leaving Richard to pick up the pieces of a life he no longer recognized. And Munachi knew something Richard didn't. Something that was just beginning to unfold. Andy was a man of mystery, wealthy, influential, and feared by many. His farmlands stretched far and wide, and his connections reached deep into every corner of the neighboring town. But there was something else about him, something that set him apart from the others. People couldn't quite put their finger on it, but they all sensed it. He wasn't traditional, nor was he deeply religious. He was a man who exuded a quiet power, a man others feared without understanding why. One afternoon, as Andy was driving through the bustling community market, his eyes caught sight of her, Munachi. She walked gracefully along the crowded street, heading toward her shop, her presence like a magnet drawing every gaze. Without a second thought, Andy signaled his driver to stop. He had to speak to her. As he approached, Munachi's smile, charming and enchanting as ever, caught him off guard. It was effortless. She had that effect on people. But what Andy didn't expect was her reaction when he introduced himself. The moment she learned he was a wealthy man, she agreed almost instantly to meet him the next day. Andy, usually accustomed to women fawning over his wealth, felt a strange unease. He had never met anyone quite like Munachi. She was beautiful, independent, and seemed content with her life. It made no sense that she would agree to spend time with him so quickly. Something about her seemed calculated. Andy couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her than met the eye. The next evening, they met at one of the finest restaurants in town. The food was exquisite, the atmosphere perfect. They talked about everything and nothing, but Andy couldn't stop analyzing her every move. She was warm, yet distant, a combination that intrigued him. After dinner, he suggested they go somewhere more private, and Munachi agreed without hesitation. At the hotel room, the tension between them was palpable. As they moved closer, Andy couldn't ignore the odd sensation against his skin as he reached to touch her. A coldness. It came from the beads she wore around her waist. "What is this?" Andy asked, unable to hide his curiosity. Munachi smiled warmly, as she always did when speaking of the beads. "It's a gift from my grandmother. I've had it since I was little. It's like a second skin to me." But Andy wasn't satisfied with her explanation. There was something unsettling about the way she spoke of it, as if the beads held more significance than she let on. "I don't like it," Andy said firmly. "Take it off." "It's harmless," Munachi replied, her tone soft, as if she were reassuring him. "It's just a waist bead." "No," Andy insisted, his voice firm. "I want you to take it off. You can wear it later when we're done." Munachi's expression shifted ever so slightly, but she refused. "I'm not taking it off." Andy's patience wore thin. "Then I'm not interested," he said, his voice cold. "If you won't take it off, I'll have my driver take you home." Munachi stared at him, confused. "Why?" Andy's jaw tightened. "Unless you take it off, I'm done here." Munachi stood up, gathering her things to leave, but as she reached the bathroom door, Andy's suspicion overtook him. He moved quickly, stepping behind her, his hand reaching out to grab the beads. With a sharp pull, Andy yanked at the beads, intending to remove them from her waist. But in that moment, something strange happened. The beads snapped. They tore apart, scattering onto the floor like broken glass. Munachi let out a loud scream, her voice filled with terror and pain. The sound echoed in the room, sending chills down Andy's spine. "Calm down," he shouted, trying to reassure her. "I'll buy you a new one. It's just a bead. It doesn't mean anything." But Munachi wasn't calming down. Her screams grew louder, more frantic, and her body began to tremble. Her eyes seemed to widen in fear, and Andy could swear he saw something else in them, something dark, something primal. "Stop!" Munachi cried out, her voice desperate. "You don't understand. You've made a terrible mistake." Andy stepped back, his heart racing. He had no idea what was happening, but he could feel the tension in the room grow unbearable. It was as if something had been unleashed, and it wasn't something he could control. Her trembling worsened, and for the first time, Andy felt fear, real, raw fear. The air seemed to grow colder, and he instinctively backed away. "I'll get you another one," he repeated, his voice shaking, but Munachi wasn't listening. She was no longer the calm, collected woman he had met just the day before. Something had changed, something inside her had snapped. And Andy realized, with a chilling certainty, that he had just crossed a line he couldn't undo. As Munachi ran out of the hotel room, her screams pierced the night air, sending a shiver through Andy. He stood frozen, watching her as she stumbled down the hallway, nearly naked, her body trembling uncontrollably. It was no longer the confident woman he had met just hours ago. She looked like a woman possessed, running aimlessly through the streets. The sound of her screams echoed through the community, drawing the attention of the locals. People began to gather, peeking out of their homes and coming out into the streets to see what was happening. Some recognized Munachi immediately. She was the most beautiful woman in the town, everyone knew her. But no one had ever seen her like this before. "Isn't that Munachi?" one of the onlookers asked, confused and concerned. "What's happening to her?" As Munachi continued to run, her voice became clearer, her words barely comprehensible through her cries and sobs. I've destroyed them," she shouted, her words echoing through the crowd. "I've ruined them. I've taken their glory." The people in the crowd exchanged shocked glances. This wasn't the Munachi they knew. This was someone else, someone broken, someone desperate. As she kept running, she began to shout the truth of her existence, confessing her darker secrets. Munachi's origins are shrouded in mystery. She was sent from the marine world with a dark mission, to seduce men and drain their vitality. She was raised by her grandmother, who gave her the waist beads that serve as both a symbol of her curse and a vessel for her power. Each time she sleeps with a man, the venom in the beads weakens him, leaving him a shell of who he once was. She has spent years moving from town to town, leaving a trail of destroyed lives behind her. Munachi has become numb to the pain she causes, believing that her curse is simply her destiny. "I go to different places," she cried out, "I sleep with men to steal their glory, to destroy their lives. I was sent from the marine world to ruin men, to drain their energy. Each community I enter, I have to sleep with 7 men, and Andy was the 7th, her voice grew frantic as she spoke. "You don't understand. The beads I wear, they are not just beads, they are snakes. They are venomous. Once a man sleeps with me, the venom inside the beads slowly drains his life, and now you've ruined everything." The crowd gasped in horror, slowly piecing together the terrible truth about Munachi. She wasn't just a woman, they realized. She was something far darker, something supernatural. Munachi confessed how she had destroyed the lives of several prominent men in the community, each one reduced to nothing after crossing her path. Their names were whispered in the crowd, and the realization of the scale of her destruction hit hard. No one was safe from her curse. Anger and fear gripped the crowd. The locals, already shaken by her confession, began to close in on Munachi, shouting and cursing her for what she had done to their community. Some tried to restrain her, while others, driven by rage, began to beat her. They felt betrayed, and the pain of losing their prominent men, now broken by her influence, pushed them into a frenzy. Munachi, still screaming in terror, tried to escape, but the anger of the crowd overwhelmed her. By the time the police arrived, it was too late. Munachi had already fallen silent, her life taken by the fury of those she had destroyed. The streets fell eerily quiet as the weight of what had just happened sank in. And so, the reign of Munachi, the woman who had caused so much suffering, came to a violent end. But the damage was done. The men she had destroyed, prominent men, leaders, fathers, remained in their broken states. No one knew how to help them, how to restore what had been taken. They were shells of the men they used to be, their glory drained away, their spirits shattered. In the wake of Munachi's death, the community, shaken to its core, passed a decree: no one in Mbasi should ever wear waist beads again. The beads, it was now clear, were more than just an accessory, they were a symbol of a curse that had nearly destroyed them all. The people moved forward, haunted by the memory of what had happened, but they knew that they could never forget the price they had paid. The power of the beads and the truth about Munachi would never leave them. The dark secret of the marine world had been revealed, and with it, the true cost of seeking glory at the expense of others. The people of Mbasi would remember the lesson, and they would never allow such evil to take root again. As the dust settled and the echoes of Munachi's death faded into the night, the town of Mbasi was left in the heavy silence of what had transpired. The once beautiful, enchanting woman who had promised pleasure and power was gone, her reign of destruction shattered by the very curse she had carried with her. The community, though relieved, was not untouched. The scars left by her manipulations ran deep, and the men she had destroyed, broken and weak, remained trapped in the ruins of their former lives. Andy, though he had witnessed the chaos unfold, couldn't shake the feeling of loss. He had once been a man of strength, respected by all who knew him. But now, even he wondered if the venom of Munachi's curse had left a permanent mark on his soul. He stood at the edge of the community, looking out over the fields he had once owned, now feeling like a mere shadow of the man he had been. Richard, too, was not the same. He had lost everything in a single night, the wealth, the career, and the life he had worked so hard to build. But perhaps, in the darkest of moments, he had found something he hadn't known he was searching for: humility. The arrogance that had driven him to chase after Munachi, to prove his worth to the world, had been stripped away, leaving him to face the man he truly was. And the people of Mbasi, forever changed by the secrets they had uncovered, had to rebuild. The decree banning waste beads would become a part of their collective memory, a painful reminder of the darkness that had once threatened to consume them. They would carry the lessons learned in their hearts, that beauty can conceal the most terrifying of truths, that the desire for power can lead to unimaginable destruction, and that sometimes, the greatest strength lies in the courage to confront what is hidden in the shadows. The town of Mbasi would never forget Munachi's curse. And in the quiet, peaceful nights that followed, they would remember the price of temptation and the cost of trusting the wrong person. But as the seasons changed, life slowly returned to normal. The fields grew green again, the market bustled with life, and the people found peace in the knowledge that their community had survived. And yet, deep in their hearts, there was always the lingering thought, the knowledge that darkness, though defeated for now, would always find a way to return. For the story of Munachi was not the end, it was merely a warning. A warning that sometimes, the greatest evils are not seen at first, and that the battle between light and darkness is one that must be fought every single day. Hope you enjoyed this story. If you did, please share your thoughts in the comments section, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Be sure to turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss out on more amazing content like this one. See you in the next video.